you either loved or hated Dig Dug. I've never met anybody that says, "Ah, Dig Dug, that's all right." They love Dig Dug or they hate Dig Dug. Me personally, when it came out, I played the crap out of it. It was fantastic. But its significance in history is important because it's still being made. I mean, you still can buy game packs that have Dig Dug on it. It's a property that has lasted a long time. Bagman. I loved Bagman. That was like that. Hardly anybody's ever seen Bagman in the arcade. Maybe you've played a home version like on the Commodore 64. It was actually at the East Wenatchee Rec Center where I worked. They had a Bagman machine. And this was an insane game because it was, I guess, it was so hard that it was fun, right? It was so challenging. It was hard. They had so many elements of gaming kind of wrapped up in there. They had sort of a Pac-Man feel. When you pick up a pickaxe, you could go after the guard, but then he'd come back. They had elevators. They had mine cars. I don't know. To me, it was an amazing game that got very little love. That's a Stern game, by the way. Pole position, of course, Burger Time. Burger Time has stood the test of time. Test of Burger Time. That's been hoarded everywhere, and it's still being remade and rehashed and redone now. Donkey Kong Jr., of course. Not, of course, as great as the original Donkey Kong, but it definitely generated some love. Zaxxon. Probably, I'm not positive, but I'd say probably the first 3D perspective game that anybody would remember. There was like iRobot, but how many people have actually seen an iRobot machine? Zaxxon was everywhere. Zaxxon got port after port after port after port. And that was the first time I looked at that and I was like, holy crap, that's like 3D. You know, you actually had to have 3D spatial skills to play Zaxxon. And a lot of people didn't have it, which is why a lot of people didn't like Zaxxon. They couldn't see that 3D. Who knew that would come in to be the most popular type of gaming later? Q*bert, of course. Tron, oh my God. This is funny because Tron is not on the list, the original list that I was looking at for 1982 on, I think, Wikipedia, or one of the wikis that are out there about video gaming. Tron wasn't on there. How do you dismiss Tron? I mean, Tron's fantastic for a couple of different reasons, right? First of all, it used, God, I knew as soon as I started talking about it I wasn't going to remember. Was it RCR graphics? It's the ones that, like Satan's Hollow used, the Domino Rally, all of the games right in that era from that particular developer, and of course I don't have any specific notes on that, but Tron was that same type of glowing graphics. It was a little higher resolution. It looked fantastic. And the theme song, of course, it had the music to back it. The arcade cabinet screamed at you when you came into the room, the glowing neon. It was just it was gorgeous, right? Despite the fact that most of the elements of the game that are actually in the game weren't really significant in the movie. Forget about that. That doesn't matter. It's still a great game. And Tron was a 1982 title. Pooyan. Pooyan's another one of those games that I absolutely love. I've had it on a million platforms. And it was also one of the weird games that a lot of people haven't seen that was actually at the East Wenatchee Rec Center when I worked there. And it's like, you know, this is Wenatchee, which is no place, right? It's the nowhere town on a nowhere map. And here it is. These weird games like Pooyan and Bagman existed at this little arcade that I worked at. It was crazy. Popeye. Right? Who does not love Popeye? Possibly, I'm not positive, but that's one of the very rare third-party licenses that Nintendo made. You know, because Nintendo doesn't own Popeye. That had to be, you know, I think that's King Feature Syndicate that owns that license. But yet Nintendo built a game, a very good game, a beautiful game, on a license they didn't own. It was very strange. Popeye's a great game. It might have been a conversion cab for Donkey Kong, too, which, of course, was helpful in my, you know, poor little town where money was tight. So Popeye, Star Trek Strategic Operations Simulator. I loves me some Star Trek. Star Trek is a vector graphics game that featured an overhead view radar type in one corner, a first-person view in the bottom, and it featured photon torpedoes and warp drive, and it was one of those games that had incredible sound. It had samples of Spock and Scotty, and it was an action game, right? Up until that point, Star Trek had always been some sort of like a turn-based game. We've all played that Star Trek game where you're in a 9x9 galaxy, and each quadrant has X number of star bases and Klingons, right? We've played Star Trek over and over again as a strategic simulation, but this was like an arcade simulator. How freaking cool is that, right? This, of course, is the year for Williams games. Robotron, Joust, Bubbles. Bubbles is another game no one's ever played, but Bubbles was at the East Wenatchee Rec Center. It's totally crazy. And, of course, the venerable Sinistar was also rounding up that lineup. Also in 1982, one of my favorite arcade games of all time, Time Pilot. Time Pilot was fantastic. It used like a 32-direction joystick or something like 16 or 32, something crazy like that. And that lets you control, of course, a ship in the center of the screen. This is weird. You didn't see a lot of these type of games. The ship stayed in the center of the screen while everything moved around it. Kind of like Bosconian, only with, instead of being 4 direction, it was like 32 directions. So you had very finite, tight control of your bullets. And it was frantic. And it's a greed game, too. A lot of my favorite games, of course, are greed games. And Time Pilot is all about greed. That's perfect. And the last arcade game that I've got on the list, this game, to me, has, along with Robotron, has withstood the test of time, for me personally, the longest of any arcade game of all, and that's Mr. Do. I still play Mr. Do. I would say, on the average, you could say I play Mr. Do a couple times a month, right? I'll fire it up whenever I need something to do, and I don't have any more TV to watch, I don't have any new games on the 3DS to play or on the Android. I will fire up MAME on my tablet and I will throw down Mr. Do. It's a game that I can continue to come back to over and over again. And Mr. Do is a greed game, without question. It's one of the best greed games on the planet. Maybe Zookeeper is more of a greed game than Mr. Do. But overall, Mr. Do has got to be one of the top greed games, right up with Robotron. Absolutely fantastic. The best part of Mr. Do is a casual player gets in and out of the game in a couple of minutes, right? You get dead. A lot of people don't know the higher level strategies of how to play Mr. Do. But if you're good at Mr. Do, most arcade games, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're dead in 5 minutes. They want your quarters in, you gone, and the next quarter in as soon as possible. Mr. Do, much like Galaga, if you were good at it and you knew how to play it, you could play Mr. Do for 20 or 30 minutes on a quarter. No problem. And then it gets to a point to where it becomes insane, right? You can play for like 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden the game turns into Satan himself. And you're lucky to live another 2 rounds. But much like other greed-type games like Pac-Man Championship Edition, the 5-minute version of Pac-Man Championship, where essentially you've played the game so much that you're now fine-tuning each level to get the maximum points returned. That's a crazy game. That's a game that it embeds itself into your psyche. And Mr. Do is one of those types of games. Even maybe more so than one of my other top favorites, which would be Robotron.